Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 3 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 going on 17 novels of suspense. My brand new book is called All This Could Be Yours, about an author on book tour, a very, very scary book tour. It comes out September the 9th, and you can remember that because that's the same day that Dan Brown's new book comes out. So that'll be so much fun. So when you hear about Dan Brown's book, you just say to yourself, my friend Hank has a book coming out the same day, and it's called All This Could Be Yours, and we'll deal with Dan later. But today, the fantastic and marvelous and brilliant and genius that is Megan Abbott and her brand new DORADO Drive. She is on tour for it right now, and this is all the buzz. It is only Megan Abbott could write this beautiful, heartbreaking, wry, and sort of languid suburban noir about greed and sisters and money and hope and aspiration and what it feels like to be a woman and what's expected from you and what you're supposed to do and what happens if that doesn't happen and what can you do then. So all those things and much more in the pages of DORADO Drive, and we will talk to Megan in 1 second. Let me ask you though, Megan, before we go to the bio, hey, Susie Baldwin, hey, Shannon Hansen, look at everybody who is here today. That's so nice to see you all. Hi, Shanson. You've written so many books and they're all just acclaimed and they're all they're so Megan Abbott-y, but they're so different from each other. We'll talk about that later. But do you still, you're on book tour now. Do you still think about, here's my pub day and what will happen and what if nobody likes it? Does that ever go away?
No, not for me. I always think it will, and it never does. It's always blind terror for me on pub day. And really the 2 weeks before, and I always sort of dread it, not because I'm dying for people to read it and I'm dying to see people on tour, but and that stuff never goes away. I think that's real childhood stuff in all of us about wanting to be patted on the head, and that I've never been able to shake that. So I have some pharmaceutical solutions to some of it, but for the most part, I really try to be present, for the events and try to enjoy it because the events are so wonderful. It's a lot of the in between time, the private thoughts that we all have, while we're out there, like, what if this isn't a good book? What if everybody hates it? What if everyone was lying that gave me a blurb? All that kind of stuff. So.
I never thought about it that way as childhood. That here we are, here you write this gorgeous, gorgeous book, and it's fine in your home, and there's all kinds of publicity before, but then you're out there and you're really saying to people, love it for me, okay? Love this. And what if they don't? It's just like in 4th grade.
Yes, absolutely. No, it always reminds me of I don't remember this, but someone told me this once, that one time one of my teachers in 3rd grade told me that my folder was messy and I burst into tears. So I think that does go to really old stuff, but I think different old stuff, because most writers I know do struggle with the stress of the actual pub date and sort of you're also letting go of something that was just yours, and that's part of it too. It's no longer yours, and so you can't keep it safe.
That's true. I'm so sorry about the teacher saying that your folder was messy. That is traumatic. It was messy too, in a gorgeous and beloved way. You have embraced the messiness and made it work for you. That is exactly what has happened. And I hope he or she, your teacher, knows how well you turned out. Speaking of how well you turned out, welcome you all to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. Just very quickly, you remember A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago. Weird to think, huh? By the fabulous powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt, to keep us reading and discovering new authors and maybe reconnecting with some of your favorite authors. And that's why we have persevered and continue to do so through all these years. Also, we are giving away, well, we're not, Megan is giving away a copy of this gorgeous new book, DORADO Drive, to one lucky commenter. So leave a question or a comment or just general approval and adulation for Megan in the comments. And you will be entered to win when we spin the Wheel of Fun at the end, and you don't want to miss that. Reagan, Megan Renee is here, who says, I cannot wait to read your new book. Cheryl Steuben is here, and Beverly is here, and Emily is here. And Emily says, send your book to your teacher, Megan. Have you done that?
I should. That would show them.
Definitely. That would definitely show them.
They think revenge is a dish best served cold, right?
Yes, but it still works. Well, I don't know. I read a whole lot about revenge for a book that I worked on. And it turns out that it's really never very reassuring.
No, you don't get
satisfying. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. So unsuccessfully. Never satisfying. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking in 10 seconds. But first, I want to tell you about Megan Abbott. Megan is the Edgar-winning author of a whole list of novels we know and love. Queen Pin, Bury Me Deep, Dare Me, Fever, You Will Know Me, and Give Me Your Hand. And now, El Dorado Drive. Abbott is co-showrunner, writer, and executive producer of Dare Me, the TV show adapted from her novels. So good. She was also a staff writer on HBO's The Deuce. You remember that. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times Magazine, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, and so many more. Born in the Detroit area, she graduated from the University of Michigan and received her PhD in English and American Literature from New York University. And I fondly remember a long conversation we had about The Great Gatsby in the back of a cab. Remember that? You're the world's expert on Gatsby, and I will never forget that. She has taught at NYU, SUNY, and the New School University, and has served as the John Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi. She is also the author of a nonfiction book, The Street Was Mine, White Masculinity in Hard-Boiled Fiction and Film Noir, and the editor of A Hell of a Woman, an anthology of female crime fiction. She is currently developing more of her novels for television, including El Dorado Drive, and we'll get to that in a minute. Finally, we are all about you, Megan, all about you. I always love to hear how authors describe their own books. So would you do that for us?
Yes. This is the first book I've set in my hometown of Grosse Pointe, which is a suburb of Detroit. And it's about three sisters. They're in their 40s. And it's Detroit in 2008, so the last recession and right before the auto industry bailout. So it's a real time of economic peril for Detroit. And Grosse Pointe in particular is really, when growing up there, most people I know's parents worked in the auto industry one level or another. And they all have, for different reasons, they need money very badly. One is going through a very contentious divorce with a husband who's very good at hiding the money. One has a husband with some health problems, and one has a big debt. So they get enticed to join this club with a lot of women they know, where it's sort of women supporting women. And the idea is that everyone will pitch in money and support one another, and it will be this great self-actualizing money-making operation for them all. And things don't go well in a number of ways, but that's the basic story. It does a lot about women and their relationship to money, as you can guess.
Yes. And it's so touching and so relatable about it. I mean, I think every single person who reads this book, women especially, will compare themselves to one of the sisters or possibly all of the sisters and talk and think, what would I do in that situation, and how far would I go to get what I think I must have? How much, and let's talk about that for a second. How much does desire and greed and wanting and expectation play into this story?
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought of it as greed. Just, because I suppose I always sort of want to be the advocate for my characters, and they're all in a financial dilemma that they want to climb their way out of. But to your point, there are a lot of the ones who do very well in this club. There's a lot of enticements to they all grew up with relative affluence, and now that affluence is gone. So when you have some money again, the desire to go, to buy the beautiful handbag, for instance, is really paramount, and keeps people continuing. But I guess I think of it more as these are women in their 40s and 50s at the club, then this is the first chance for some of them in their life to make their own money and feel a sense of power over having it and not counting on their husband or their family money. And if there's something very intoxicating too about just having desire at that age, because you're not supposed to, it's supposed to be all for your kids, and you're supposed to not want things. And I think they all still kind of want things. So I guess I thought about it that way more, though. Things, as things progress, it definitely gets out of hand.
Yes, and I'm just going to pluck that word that you said, desire, because I think the book's engine is desire for whatever reason. If you grow up in an affluent community or with an affluent life and just thinking, you can have those little Chanel flats, and now that it's far from your ken, but you've grown up thinking that you are that. Yeah. And how do you get that expectation back? And and the title is so aspirational, even, so such a promise of riches, the search for El Dorado, is that Harlan Coben says it's an absolute knockout. Tell a little bit about how you came to this title, and it's mythological even.
Yeah, the title came late. Though I had known it comes really from the Edgar Allan Poe poem, though the concept of El Dorado as the city of gold is much older than Poe. But he writes about it as this sort of promised land of endless riches. And I ended up that Pam, the middle sister, who had the greatest wealth because she married a real financial wheeler dealer before their divorce, has to move to a rental house on a sort of shaggier part of town. And the street is called El Dorado Drive, and everyone sort of makes a lot of jokes about it in the book because it's sort of the least grand street in town, but it has this grand name. And so at a certain point, we're like struggling for a title, especially because it's set in Detroit area. So Cadillac El Dorado, of course, is one of the big prestige cars of my childhood. Not that my family ever had one, but it all seemed to sort of fall into place the way when you get your title and it all sort of locks into place. Like this is the title. It means a couple different things at once. So
I love that. And it's also about, if the book is about ambition, the drive for El Dorado. Yes. So it's about the journey as well. So yes. not just a street name, but action.
That's right. That's better. I'm stealing that next time someone asks me. I like that. That's true. That's absolutely. It's not El Dorado Street, not El Dorado Lane, but Drive. It suggests that kind of engine, that kind of desperation for mobility. Yes, absolutely.
And listen to all the car words that you just said, engine and mobility. Yeah. It's really funny. You're totally Grosse Pointe girl. So great. The sisters work so perfectly. How they click together and how they contrast and conflict. Can you talk a little bit about each one of them briefly and how they evolve for you?
Yeah, I write about sisters a lot. I realize someone pointed out to me, I think it's because I have a brother. I don't have any sisters, and they sort of fascinate me. And I'm always interested in all the layers that I think is different than the brother and sister. The layers of competition and rivalry and deep love and loyalty and petty grievances from 30 years ago. And so I really wanted to give that sense of history between them. But in many ways, the oldest is a classic oldest sibling, Deb, and she's a rule follower, and she does everything right and has never reached too far too fast. That she's very the kind of mistress, I guess, of the three of them. And Pam, the middle sister, is much more the wild one that always had a passion to have a big life, and she did, and now she wants it back. And Harper, like a lot of youngest and a lot of middle siblings too, I suppose, is the little bit the forgotten one, and she's sort of an outsider. She does, she's not straight. She's not going to get married and she's not going to have kids probably. So she never really bought into that fantasy, and then everyone was really available. You know how if things happened in your childhood in a family, the older siblings and the youngest sibling have almost completely different childhood because of the fortunes or the success of the marriage or something about how things are going in the family. And I think Harper is the youngest when things were sort of sliding downward. So
I have four siblings. My brother is 10 years younger than I am, and then there are three sisters in the middle. And I just saw that dynamic play
Yes.
out in your book so completely
Well, thank
gorgeously.
you.
And then there's and I have to tell you that if you don't have sisters, at least they're not going to be thinking it's them.
Yes, that's right. I'm safe.
You're safe. I just interviewed Oyen Khan Braithwaite, who wrote My Sister, the
Oh,
Serial Killer,
love
and
that
she
book.
yes, it's incredible. And she's amazing, but she says her real sister is upset about it. So
Gosh, I guess it would be, especially first person like that.
I think they're still working it out. Hi, Oya. It was fun to talk with you. And then you bring in the younger generation for all of the sisters to play off. Talk about why you did that and why that works.
Yeah, I was really interested. I think this is happening. Even the book is set in 2008, but I think the same thing is happening now, where there's this enormous generation gap in terms of figuring out what the future will look like. I think if you were like a boomer or an older Gen Xer, you really grew up in a world where there was still the notion that you could have the same job for 40 years and they would protect you and give you your pension and you get the gold watch at the end. And that world doesn't exist anymore. It's so different, and nor does the same like traditional nuclear family is what everyone does, and everyone's going to get married, have two kids, buy the house, and a white picket fence, etc. So the gap is really strong for Pam's kids, especially her daughter Vivian, who's this rebellious teenager, has no interest in living her mother's life, and is sort of mystified by the club, and which I think feels to her like a bygone era, which of course it is when you're a teenager. It is, So I thought that was important and useful, to sort of show that, as we were in that era, which was only not that many years ago, there's this sort of gap, in terms of expectation, and how clearly you can map the future out.
Yes, and what in your life is important, and what in your life is valuable, and also your relationship to someone who's your mother or your aunt is going to be
Yes.
different, and the competition therein as well. Everybody in the comments, Sue Street and Katie and Andrew, Renee and Betty and Sue are discussing their birth order.
Oh yes, because
This
yes.
is something here.
It is. There's a new book that's all about siblings by Susan Dominus, who's a New York Times writer. It's fascinating about birth order and relationships. I have been told that the data shows that perhaps our relationship with our sibling is even more important than with our parents. It's under explored and under researched, and so I think that's really interesting. And how you get trapped in a role, based on the birth order. And whatever role you have in among the children, it's impossible to shake it. You will have it for the rest of your life with your siblings. They will always see you as the screw up, or the pain in the butt, or etc.
Exactly. Well, I'm the one who's always right. Just I hesitate to bring up the club, but it is, and the wheel, but it is in the cover flap. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, we all knew about, some of us knew about the Fuller Brush, and then there was Avon, and even Girl Scout cookies,
Yes.
almost. Talk a little bit about what that is and where the idea came from.
Yeah, I was really interested during the pandemic, the rise of a lot of these, targeted to women. Sort of, there's direct sales like that, and this is just kissing cousins to that. But direct sales like Herbalife or Amway, Mary Kay, where it's a way for a woman, say, who hasn't been in the workforce because she's had kids or something, can enter the workforce by being direct sales of a product where everyone feels like they're on a team and they're all selling the same thing. And then this is the kissing cousin, are these other operations where you're not selling anything, but the idea is that you're investing in the club. So there's a buy-in, as they would say, in the world of business. And this is actually much more common now, because in some ways it's less visible. It's hard to figure out why it could be a problem. You have to really think about it, because everyone's willingly giving money to take part in it. But like any of these situations, like those direct sales, MLMs, etc.
Mm.
These are the same in that they require constant recruitment. You have to have new members for anyone to make money, and that is always a dangerous proposition.
Yeah, multi-level marketing. The thing that's so interesting to me about how the women deal with what essentially is multi-level marketing of exchange of money is that I think I can say this. Everybody knows that they always collapse at some point because under the weight of this constant recruitment, if you're the last in, you're the first to lose.
Yeah, I don't. Based on, they should know, but I ended up researching a lot of ones that went afoul of the law, and they often don't get caught. But when they do, it's usually because a disgruntled former member goes to the feds, but so reading about the ones that got in trouble and ran afoul of the law, people really believed it was equivalent to, there used to be a very common thing in a community where everyone would throw $10 in the pot for the neighbor who had a fire or had a sick kid, and this is a version. This is a version of that. The difference is, of course, the math of bringing in new members. So I think probably for a lot of these women, they're thinking they're going to do it once. Can't be that hard to rise in the levels. You have a buy it, and eventually you're going to make your money. That they will collect, and then the group will be done or start over somehow. So I think people really, when you're desperate, you can really talk yourself into a lot. And I think for these women, to one degree or another, are pretty desperate. So I think that's what interested me. And then the sort of the ones that are like Harper, I would say, is a bit. It sounds too good to be true, but she is so in debt that this feels like the only solution. So she's put aside that part of her head that's saying, "Oh, this thing."
Right, because your rational side would be pushed away by
Yes.
your need for a physical thing like money or
Yes,
emotional thing like support and sisterhood,
that's right.
which is both of which is what this group is
Yeah,
offering. And it feels like a good sorority. You're the
absolutely.
queen of sororities and the queen of, I'm thinking about this. How many times you write about groups of women and the interaction of
Yes.
groups of women. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really is a through line through most of my books. I can't really explain other than I'm very interested in subcultures. So in this case, subcultures of women sharing the secret, but also subcultures of ballet dancers
Yeah.
or cheerleaders or female scientists. And how they have their own rules independent of social rules because they've created their own little safe sphere where they make up the rules. They have their own leadership, and I think, to some extent we all do that with our female friends, even like the group chat or something. And there's like what we say and don't say, what we share with other people or don't. And that stuff just fascinates me. There can be something very radical about it, that you're kind of hiding from society at large and having this safe female space. But also can be, and because I write crime novels, it can be very dangerous.
Yes, as we see, we're talking about El Dorado Drive by Megan Abbott. You'll realize what she just said there, because remember, she does write crime novels, and this is indeed that. And I want to remind you that one of you lucky commenters will win a copy of El Dorado Drive. Just leave a question or a comment when we spin the wheel. We call
Right.
it have fun at the end of the show. No one's going to get hurt in this, however. When you were talking about groups of women and the sort of crucible of all the people together, it is sort of a substitute for having a family. You can't choose your family, but you can choose this group that you're in. No matter whether you call it a cabal or a sorority or a coven or the wheel, you're part of a yearning for a family. Does that play into this at all, do you think?
I think absolutely. And I think that's the big appeal of it for a lot of people, which is also true with MLMs, because there's a lot of team building and a sense that we trust each other, we know each other, we have the same lingo, everyone's supporting one another. And I think for these women, when the money was going, when the money was coming in, they were all in. They were members of the country club. Maybe they were ride horses together. They had the benefit committee. They were in the parent teacher association together. So they're used to having all these groups and these activities. And when the money goes away, you can't renew your country club membership. You're not riding any horses. Like all these things start to go away. So this becomes a way to sort of recapture that and to give them this sense of sisterhood. And that's also sort of the danger of how some of these operate, is because they do have used the language of feminism and that this is women taking control of our finances. And in a way it is, but I would say under a lot of false pretext. So it's interesting how complex it gets with and that this has always been historically a female.
Sure.
Since Avon, Mary Kay, it's that Tupperware would be a good.
Exactly so. And the other, sort of writerly thing about it is when you bring up that these women are in this essentially MLM group, multi-level marketing group, it's doomed to fail. And so the minute that you mention that somebody is in this or that this exists, we, the reader, are already like, uh-oh, knife on the table or gun on the table or whatever Chekhov said, this is bound to fail. And so we hear this sort of Jaws music underneath, right, as we're reading it. It's so nice.
Yeah, it gives it an edge, because especially lately, because some of them don't fail, because Avon some of these are still around and doing very well. But what we've definitely seen is so much of it. Everyone knows someone that was to sell them the jewelry. There's been so many of these, or get them involved in this thing called the circle, so everyone knows someone or has seen one of the many in the last 5 years, documentaries about the leggings MLM, or there's been so many exposés. So it does create for the reader that's been paying attention to any of this sort of that you kind of want. It is a suspense novel. Of course, you want the reader to feel this sort of doomy feeling and wondering how it's going to go badly.
Also, and Avon and Mary Kay work because there's a thing that they're selling, and they depend on the sales of a product. And this depends on getting more people to put in money for essentially placement. And
really, the only difference is there's a product in MLMs and in these, which could be called pyramid schemes, just because of the recruitment. You're not selling a product, and one could say that that's less, because when you have to buy the products and you don't sell them, you lose all that money. So they're more similar than it seems. But these women who are upper middle class, they're really not going to go door to door. Maybe they should. It would humble them, but I think this feels more socially acceptable. They just throw these parties and everyone brings cash. So I think that's
the common good, and sisters raise each other up, and everybody's equal and everybody's pitching in, and it sounds really great. My sister and I used to leave our Girl Scout cookies on the dining room table, so my mother would open the box and then she would have to buy it, and then we wouldn't have to go door to door.
Oh my God! Yes, yeah. See that you could have led your own.
And as we sort of wind down my questions for you, the style of this book is so gorgeously unique. It's like it's some very short scenes that are braided together in time and in emotion and in rhythm. There's such a music to this, and we get drawn into being in the wave of this story, that it sort of rolls on. How this is the world's dumbest question. How do you write that? How do you do that? How does your brain think?
It is the thing that's hard. It's I know I don't have a book until I can figure out what that feeling is. It's a little different for each book, but the atmosphere of it is really important for me. And so I'm sort of instinctually trying different things to evoke just that kind of lulling feeling, that sort of sense of past and present collapsing, because these are sisters. So they're always talking about their childhood together, and then they have this sort of present scenario. So it's sort of, and then I will say this book was different in the fact that it's the first book I've set in Grosse Pointe, my hometown. So it had this weird nostalgia for me. It was summoning up places that don't exist anymore, or that I haven't been to in 30 plus years. And it had all complicated feelings that nostalgia always creates in us. So I think it has a particularly charged quality because they're all places I've been to. There's this bar in the book called Rustic Cabins that I know very well. There's all the restaurants are all restaurants I've been to. The country club, I was not a member of it, but sometimes one of the members would invite me to ride a horse for the day. So
Even stranger.
yeah.
It's total fish out of water.
Yes, absolutely. I always felt like I didn't belong there, and I had the wrong shoes, and didn't. I don't know, every kind of disaster of how they everything seems so easy for people in country clubs, because that was not my world. So I think there's some of that feeling, and that a lot of that went to Harper as the sort of outsider among the sisters.
I mean, I have friends who I always think, they always know when to put the pot of impatiens on the front lawn. I mean, on the front porch.
Yes.
And what color they're supposed to be this year, and when the chrysanthemum comes out, and chrysanthemums come out, and what dishes you use for Christmas. I don't know.
Yes.
How do they know?
No one gave me that information.
Yeah, exactly. And I was trying to search for a word that the book felt to me, and I kept coming up with sort of weary, lugubrious, longing feeling.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking to read this. How are you feeling when you read it? You said nostalgia, and I think that
Yeah.
it's so perfect. When you closed the book and finished?
Yeah, no, I think so. I always try, this is what sort of saves me from sort of getting a little lost in it, is I always try to put my characters on their feet at the end. Um and hopefully in a better place. And so I always knew that was going to happen. I mean, not all the characters, obviously, but it is a crime novel. But and so I spend the book trying to get there. How am I going to get there? I want to save them, because even the most antagonistic characters I always kind of fall in love with by the end. So I think that always helps me when I finish the book, because I feel like I put them on safe ground somehow.
Yeah, and that's so balancing when the world is back in a new equilibrium, and that feels, because longing is hope, and if you
Right.
need to have hope.
That's right. It's making me think of our conversation about The Great Gatsby, with the ending of that book. That is the feeling of the end of the book, that green breast of America and all of that. So maybe this is very, I did think about the American dream a lot with this book, because it is about the idea that you can be self-made and you can lift yourself up by your bootstraps. And so I think it's a complicated moment for all that, as we're all sort of rethinking what all that means. So it is interesting that it's coming out now. Everything is a little chaotic. So
Chaotic. I do think, though, the boats beating ceaselessly.
Yes.
The current is so, it's so hopeful. We persevere no matter what happens, or no matter how our history tries to drown us.
That's right.
We're going to keep
That's
going.
right. The younger generation will create create a newness for us again, and so you're always counting on them to help us, save us from ourselves.
Speaking of newness, tell me the scoop about how you're transforming this.
Yes, so this will be a TV series. I'm working with A24, the independent studio, on this, and I've already written the pilot, so very excited. It would be an ongoing series. with the wheel, this being the focus of it. So it's been so fun to write it and to try to put it in visual language, because the book is very internal. This tends how I write it. So this sort of, the book is many ways a series of parties, because that's when the women meet. So writing those scenes, of course, is always my favorite. And that's meant for visual media.
Yes, and that will be absolutely terrific. And I urge you all, when it's on, whenever that is, to watch it. But you don't want to miss the book, because one of the things that Megan is talking about how much of it is internal, is one of the things I love the most about this book. In some people's sentences and scenes, there are these internal asides to themselves, not that she would ever know about that, or not that I told her about that, or she, that are so completely perfectly on the money and so pencil tight, whatever that word is that I'm looking for. They're just so pointed and focused and perfect that that's hard to do. That's a look of, that's a raise of an eyebrow in video.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly how it works. That translation. Yes.
So both of them are important. Both of them
Yes.
are important. Congratulations on this. I see we have so many people. Renee is here, and Sherry is here, and Robin and Sue and Shannon and Susie Baldwin is here. Robin Stull, Sylvia is here. I can't even say all of your names, but I welcome all of you so warmly. Let's have some questions for Megan, and then somebody will get El Dorado Drive. Renee, hey Renee. Megan, do you prefer screenwriting or novel writing?
That's a great question. I always, I think novel writing will always be my first love, for just the reason you were saying, Hank. They're very intimate and internal, and I feel so close to the reader that I'm imagining in my head, and I would never want to not have that experience where I would feel like, I always want to feel like I'm whispering in the reader's ear, and that's very different than screenwriting, which in some ways is just a plan for, because there will be a director, there will be actors, there will be a production designer, there will be a costume designer, there will be a lighting crew, all contributing to making it what it is. And screenwriting, I will say, there's something, as someone who grew up loving movies, is, getting the chance to play in that world and to find ways to tell things through images, is wonderful. And just as you were saying, something that would take me 3 pages to sort of describe in a book, or you can do in one image in a screenplay, but figuring out what that image is and how to get that feeling across. So they present different challenges. One of the biggest too is that with screenwriting, you're working for a studio or a network or a streamer. You have a lot of people giving you feedback as opposed to just your agent and your editor in novel writing. And part of that is because it's very expensive to make a movie or a TV show. It's millions of dollars, and so there is just, it's a much more collaborative process, and for better and sometimes for worse, because it can be a lot of contradictory notes you get back, and trying to sort of keep true to the story but find ways to address what isn't coming across for them. So they're quite different. So I like being able to go back and forth between the two. Whatever one I'm doing now, I prefer the other one.
As life always is. Do you envision the video as being sort of, Douglas Sirky 1950 looking, or contemporary looking?
I mean, I really think Grosse Pointe is definitely still looks like Douglas Sirk movies. It really looks like the 50s forever. It's very groomed, especially in this era, and even more when I was growing up, very pristine. And I think that's part of the story. So I think that will be a big piece of it, is that this is the place this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And that will be really fun to recreate.
Yeah, that will be. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to compare it with the book, because they're both such different animals. Who else has a question quickly for Megan? Did you see yourself, says Katie. Hi, Katie.
Yes, it's always interesting. It's always, you start thinking you're not any of them, and in the end, you're all of them. I definitely saw myself in all three sisters at different times. they all, I mean, probably Harper is the closest just because she's the youngest, I'm the youngest, and I'm in her head, through the whole book, really. But I also saw myself in Vivian, the teenager, and I also saw myself in Doug, the ex-husband, sometimes. So the part of the fun is you get to, they always say in dreams, every person in a dream is of you because you created them all, and it is a little bit like that. So you get to, like, for instance, I'm not a confrontational person, and I never yell at anyone. So when I have a character that is that kind of person, I love to write them. For instance, the woman who runs the wheel is the opposite kind of person I am. She's a very an organized person who runs a tight ship and is able to get people to do what she wants. And so she was really fun to write for that.
I was going to ask about that. That's amazing. How you pulled that personality.
Yes.
Her, this, and we know those people. We completely know those people.
Yes.
One last question, and then we'll do the giveaway. How do you celebrate Pub Day? Hey, Betty Fellows.
That's a great question because this is Pub Day.
Yeah.
I took a red eye last night from Phoenix, so I'd probably be celebrating by sleeping tonight. But I will say, I do often, on the road, you get to meet some new readers, or you get to meet, Hank, there's some booksellers we love, and you may go out after the meeting and have a great meal, and that's always really nice. That's the best part of book tour is that kind of thing. I remember once I had an event in Dallas in a small independent store, and 3 of the women who were in the same book club asked me if I wanted to come out to dinner with them and to this Mexican restaurant nearby. And I said, sure. 2 hours, we were drinking margaritas. It was amazing. So,
and meanwhile, you're thinking, I love this margarita, but my plane is at 4 in the morning.
I would have stayed. I would have sat through it. They were telling me the best Texas store. Texas has the best true crime, at least. So.
That is true. Absolutely so. That is true. We are running out of time, Megan. I hope you get a nap before tonight. Happiest of Pub Days. Let's spin the wheel of fun really, really quickly and see who will win a fabulous copy of El Dorado Drive. I'm keeping this one, as you all know, but you'll get your own. And the winner is, love this, Anissa. Oh my God. We love Anissa Joy Armstrong, who she is just the biggest advocate for readers and writers in the world. So well deserved, Anissa. You just email me and we'll get you this book. You'll see some instructions about that on the screen. The rest of you, you know what to do. Talk about celebrating Pub Day. Run, click, get your very own copy of El Dorado Drive. Extremely highly recommended. You will not be able to put this down. It's immersive and gorgeous, and will just wrap you in this ultimately inspirational story. It is. It's optimistic and hopeful, and everything is going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine.
Great. Thank you so much, Hank. This was so much fun.
Oh, my pleasure, Megan. You are just such a rock star, and I'm a massive fan. It is always wonderful to talk with you. Safe and happy travels, safe Pub Day and forever.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you for the next book and for the TV show as well. As for the rest of you, do not move. Let me show you what we're having next. In how many minutes? I'm looking at the clock. 17 minutes. We will talk to Bianca Murray about A Most Puzzling Murder. This book is full of puzzles and ciphers and clues. It is hilarious. It couldn't be more different from Live, and that's why we do what we do on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. So get some lemonade, get some tea, get some coffee, get iced, anything that you possibly can on this horrifically hot day, and come chat with the fabulous Bianca Murray about A Most Puzzling Murder. You will love it. If you can't join us at 4, then next week, let me get the book for next week. Look at this. Next Tuesday, White Python World Tour. Look, there's a guitar on the front. If you were ever into 80s rock and roll, that's what this is about in a very scary way. So next Tuesday, Travis Kennedy's White Python World Tour. In about 15 minutes, Bianca Murray. And today, Pub Day, happy Pub Day to the fabulous Megan Abbott and her terrific El Dorado Drive. So whenever we see you, take care, you all. And remember, it is always safe inside a book.